Here's the start of another E46 rear axle carrier panel repair and reinforcement process. This is a 2004 Coupe with 54,000 miles. It's come into Redish Motorsport for repair and reinforcement of the rear axle carrier panel. So we're just starting our clean degrease process, and we can already see that we've got hairline crack in the left rear mounting point on the fold of the floor, which travels up on the vertical section a little bit as well. Also got a couple of spot welds which are showing signs of flex. One spot weld broken up here. There's also a very minute crack on the right rear mounting point in the fold. Probably likely to have, yeah, we have got a crack on the right front as well. Here's the right front mounting point, semicircle crack around there. And we've also got a spot weld broken here and a crack coming out up that way, so we might have a little crack going that way. We'll know more once we've cleaned all this to try and get it clean like that. And we've got a little crack around the left front mounting point as well. So we'll clean all this dirt and grease up out into the wheel arches and then assess it properly once it's all cleaned up. So the degreasing process is fully finished, and you can see the difference, what the car would come in like underneath with few years worth of grime, mud, road debris, things like that, compared to now we've finished clearing all that off. So it's nice and bright, E-coat here, seam sealer here. That gives us good opportunity to inspect the mounting points and check for any cracks properly, because underneath the mud and dirt it's quite hard to see. For instance, when this car came in, first of all, it didn't have any cleaning, so it didn't even notice that crack until we cleaned a small section, and then we could see that there was a crack next to the left rear mounting point, which is now quite visible. A couple of spot welds that have moved. A spot weld here which is definitely broken. The other one might be okay underneath that seam sealer. We'll see more once we take that off. Very slight split in the seam sealer edge here, which is also an indication of the rear axle carrier panel very slightly moving independently to the wheel arch panel, which it's spot welded to, exactly in the location that we've got a breakage here. Mounting points in general look good, apart from the hairline crack there. Chassis legs are appearing okay. We've got the right rear mounting point, which has, at this area looks absolutely fine, but if we zoom in on this area here on the fold of the floor, we've got a small crack just starting, which is in a mirrored image of the other crack on that side, just not as long yet. Then the mounting points on the front, we've got a small hairline crack in a semicircle shape around this threaded mount here, just going from about this side to about there. One spot weld which is flexed and not yet broken, but is showing its signs of movement when you compare it to these spot welds, which are all perfect. And then the right front mount is definitely cracked. This one's quite easy to see. We've got a small hairline crack from here going around the mounting point to over here. We've got a spot weld which is broken where the bush has been impacting its lips, and now it's not only broken the spot weld, but it's caused a crack to go towards the back of the car and then up the vertical section very slightly, and then also come out of that spot weld and go forward, and at the moment it ends about somewhere around about there. So that spot weld's flexing, whereas these ones are all looking okay at the moment. So that's the 4 mounting points. So we need to do some repairs to the panel before we even consider any reinforcement. We need to stop drill these cracks, find the ends of them, stop drill them, drill out these broken spot welds or flexing spot welds, and then replace them with plug welds, weld these cracks, and then actually smooth the areas off so we can move forward to do reinforcement. So that's what our findings are so far, and now we'll go forward and stop drill the cracks. So we're almost at the end of the first stage, which is crack identification, working out where all the cracks are, where they stop, and any risky spot welds, and drilling those out. So just stop drilled, we located and stop drilled the end of this crack on the left rear mount, which ends here and under here. We had 2 risky spot welds which didn't look like they had breakages or cracks, but they're risky in terms of they've got a lot of corrosion on them, more than normal, and that tells me that they've been flexing or moving. So drilled those out. Drilled a risky one here, and it even had a crack coming out at the end of it, so I've stop drilled that with a 2mm there, drilled it out mainly with an 8. I'm happy with the underside, there's no problems there. We've got a spot weld which we need to attend to later on. At the moment I'm just working on the reinforcement plate areas. This is the left front mounting point. We had one spot weld which was showing signs of movement, so I've drilled that out, and we had a semicircle crack around the mounting point of this area here. So what we've done is oversized stop drills, 8mm at the ends of the crack here and here, and then one in the center, which allows me to make a slight incision cut to join the two radiuses of the circle up, and then the piece of metal that was in here actually just falls out. It's now missing, it's not in there. And we've got the same here, as the crack, remember, was this corroded line in a semicircle going around here, and I've just made an incision line going down this way, and now I should just be able to lever out this piece of metal that was left over. And there it goes. So that gives us a gap now, which is the thickness of this rear axle carrier panel, 1.2mm. So we've removed the crack, there's no affected bit of metal there anymore, and we've created a channel which we'll clean up and get back to bare metal, and gives us an excellent base for overhead penetration welding, so we can start on the platform, which is this piece here, and then blend into our rear axle carrier panel cover here and here. So solve the crack problem and strengthen the connection between panel and platform in one go. Here's the right front mount. I'm just in the process of starting. I'm going to start the join up lines from here to here and here to here, and then break out these small little bits of broken metal. We'll get those out, and then we can do our overhead welding shortly. We've drilled out this broken spot weld, stop drilled the ends of the crack. We have to do a 2mm on the vertical face because it's hollow behind, whereas on the horizontal face we can go 8 because there's a platform behind. And drilled out another spot weld that was showing signs of movement there. So nearly this one's done. And then on the right rear mount, stop drilled the ends of the cracks on this folded section. And also 2 spot welds that were showing signs of movement and look like they might have cracks around them on the vertical face. They've been drilled out. So once we've done this, then we'll be bare metaling the mounting point areas and removing all this E-coat and seam sealer, and going all the way over the cracked areas, and knowing that we can use machinery on them and we won't lose the lines. Even if the machinery blur or smudge this hairline crack, we're still going to be able to know where the end of it is because we've stop drilled them. So we'll see if we can prove the point of the crack. Now we've just done those 2 incisions I was talking about. One to join this outer hole up with this one, and another one from here to do that. And we're trying to remove that section of metal, which might take a little bit of levering. There it goes. A little bit holding on. You can see the corroded line on the inside edge and the corrosion underneath that panel. That's the underside, there's the top. So there's one crack gone, and there goes the other piece. So we've removed the crack and the affected piece of metal, and also created us a nice channel to get better penetrative weld into the platform and strengthen the connection between the internal platform and the rear axle carrier panel, so that it's not relying on simply 5 or 6 spot welds alone. It will have now MIG weld holding it together as well. Here's the underside of the rear axle carrier panel. Now we've been working on the mounting points. We earlier on in the video identified the ends of the cracks and drilled out any weak spot welds that we were concerned about, and now we've moved on to bare metaling. So that is a case of removing the seam sealer and removing the E-coat or electrophoretic coating to give bare metal, so that we're ready to weld and fill these gaps where we've done plug weld holes and weld over the cracks to strengthen the area again. We'll need to protect this bare metal first, and especially inside these channels where we're going to be welding. So we'll put weld through primer on, which is a silver coloured spray. That'll be going on next before we do any welding. This just gives you an idea of what it looks like bare metaled, and now how some of the cracks are so smudged from just gently wire wheeling that if we hadn't have stop drilled those crack ends, we wouldn't have likely found the ends of them. So that's why it's very important to do all the crack identification and the drilling before we attach or carry out any work with the wire wheel. And a wire wheel is a very delicate item which basically just gently rubs and smudges all of the seam sealer and E-coat off. It's not a grinding wheel, nor is it a flat disc, because what a grinding wheel and a flat disc do is actually take metal off. So you're actually thinning this piece of metal or panel, and it's already weak and stressed anyway, so you don't want it any thinner. All you want to do is just buff off all the coating so you get back to bare metal. And so next we'll protect these areas with weld through primer and then start our welding crack repair process. We finished welding the cracks that we found and the broken spot welds earlier on. I'll just show these before we start grinding them down. So that's the left front mount where we have the semicircle crack and we cut a channel out, and there's one plug weld which replaces a spot weld. Then on the right front we've got the semicircle crack repaired there, one spot weld, another spot weld, and the crack that we opened, stop drilled earlier on in the process. Very small crack on this right rear, two plug welds replaced for the spot welds that looked like they'd broken. And then on the left rear, same weld in the crack, plug weld affected there and there with a small crack coming out of it, so we went a bit larger on that one. And now we can grind these down nice and flat, treat that with a weld through primer again, and get the Redish V2 plates bolted up next. So we flushed down the welds that we just spoke about on the previous video, and again coated them with a copper weld through primer. And now we're ready to go ahead and get those reinforcement plates on. Here's the rear of the Redish V2 reinforcement plates that have just been coated with a copper weld through primer. So I finished welding the Redish V2 reinforcement plates. Here's the left front and the right front. After we've dressed down the join lines there, we like to make it look like it's one complete plate. And we've done the weld through on the 3 plug welds at the bottom and a 2 on this side. We've drilled out the first layer of rear axle carrier panel and then started our plug weld on the platform, then brought it down over the rear axle carrier panel and then into the Redish V2 plate. So that's 3 layer connections. There's the left rear. Same process with these 2 here, and also the throughs on the vertical. And that's the right rear, same on the 2 here and 2 here. So we're happy that the reinforcement plates are on. Replaced 2 broken spot welds up here for plug welds, and also done a weld on the inside. We've done our stitch weld all the way down the outside and smoothed and shaped that arch. And now we can just see that we've got a broken spot weld on the rear axle carrier panel section where it's spot welded to the left chassis leg inside the boot. That one looks okay at the moment, but that one's definitely got moisture coming out of it and also a couple of little cracks. So we'll carefully take off some more of the seam sealer, and that is just one of the extra issues that we need to sort out. This car's got some internal cavity cracks up on the front mounts, both front left and front right, which we need to get to inside the car underneath the back seat. And we've also got 2 spot weld issues down on this side on the inside of the car, and also a spot weld up around about here, and then we've also got a small one now we've noticed up here as well. So next we'll be moving on to the work inside the car. Here's the underside of the rear axle carrier panel. Now we've degreased everything and we've etch primed the bare metal, so that's the reinforcement plates on the 4 mounting points, and we've also taken any light corrosion off of these fuel pipe and brake pipe brackets, the spring perches and the cups around the edge, a little bit around the edge of this boot floor section, which you can't see is around the other side, and on the handbrake consoles up in the front section of the rear axle carrier panel. That's drying under an infrared lamp, and once that's dry we can then put high build primer on the entire rear axle carrier panel. We've applied the high build primer, which is matte black, and that goes all over the rear axle carrier panel and out into the wheel arches slightly, where we're going to be doing our sprayable seam sealer next. So left front mounting plate, right front, right rear and left rear, and the side panel's been welded as well. And now we're going to go and spray the sprayable seam sealer. Here's some of the items that will be fit into the M3 whilst it's in for the rear axle carrier panel repair. The customer would like some new subframe bushes, 4 genuine BMW subframe bushes, rear trailing arm bushes. These are going to be Powerflex polyurethane. We've got 1 ball joint which is knocking on the left trailing arm lower joint. We'll be putting a new BMW eccentric camber adjustable bolt and the washer and the lock nut there as well. Main engine poly V-belt, the exhaust clamp kit, because the exhaust clamps are quite corroded on the rear exhaust joint, and a BMW sealing ring there, which we find better than the ones that come in the kit. An engine constant pressure valve, which is starting to leak engine oil. A front Xenon headlight level sensor bracket is broken, so that is the new joint there from BMW. We're waiting on some steering tie rods to come in, and when they do, these are the new BMW spring clips that will be fit into the gaiters. And that's about it at the moment. So the sprayable seam sealer is dried overnight, and we've done a top coat of our version of E-coat colouring, just to make it look fairly original. And that is all over the rear axle carrier panel, down into the seat panel and the handbrake console, a little bit towards the rear trailing arm pockets, then onto the boot floor section as well, and then blended out into the back of the boot floor section. We've also done a body coloured top coat onto the seam sealer in the wheel arches, and this car is silver grey, so there's a silver grey paint on the inner arch side, whereas that's our version of E-coat on the underside. So you might be able to see the contrast and colours in this video, and that goes up to the just over the top of the spring shock absorber turrets, and then blended out into the top line of the wheel arches. And on the left hand arch, that's the same thing. It's just over the, well, up into the sort of the top line of the wheel arch, and especially we have to coat over the area that we did our welding on the seam panel from the rear axle carrier panel to the wheel arch piece. So that's totally dry. You can rub, touch, scratch. You're not going to take that off. It's a really nice, strong, hard finish. You can jet wash the underside of the car. Nothing sticky. Lots of people, when they do these, just put sort of the wax oil brush on or stick on wax, which is nasty because you can't really touch it or work with it nicely. But this is totally dry, and you can do what you want, caress it as much as you like. It's all nice and visually pleasing. So we can go forward and cavity wax the internal sections where we've done the welding inside these panels now. So we've now moved inside the car because we, with some bore scope camera and worked out that the front internal mounts were cracked as well. And to do that, we need to remove the interior, drill a small hole in the seat panel, look inside with a camera and access these two MIG welds, which are the ones holding the threaded receiver into the rear axle carrier panel for the front pair of rear subframe mounts. And these are cracked, so that's why we've now come in and cut a square or an access panel out of the rear seat panel this is, so we can access and repair these issues. Then we've got the Redish V2 005 reinforcement plates that will get welded back on to cover that hole, and that hole there is for waxing and future inspections. So we'll just zoom in, we'll try and focus on these MIG welds and show you where the cracks are. This is a 2mm wide drill bit, which I'm going to stop the cracks with. So this is a MIG weld and this is a MIG weld. This one looks okay, doesn't look to be any cracks coming out of that one. This one's got a crack somewhere around about there in the middle of the weld, curving round that way and going up to about here at the moment. Then there's another crack forming somewhere around the corner of this MIG weld where it attaches to the panel and is just going outboard to around about there. So we need to centre punch, stop drill them, and then we'll also remove these MIG welds because these are poor penetrating MIG welds. They certainly don't fill up all the laser cut gap that the panel came with from factory. And they're always cracking, so we're going to remove those and then apply our own MIG welds to attach the threaded receiver under here to this rear axle carrier panel cavity cover, as we call it. Then moving on to the right hand side, these cracks are a little bit longer, tend to be on this front right side. This MIG weld is quite a good, well penetrated MIG weld. There's no gap on there on the side of it, nice and flat. You'll have to look very closely for cracks on that one because there's nothing obvious, but this MIG weld is quite obvious that this has got cracks. Not bad penetration, but there is a gap down the side. So we've got a crack going across the MIG weld out to about here, another crack travelling out towards the back of the car, and another crack going through the corner of the MIG weld, heading off down towards what is the front of the car down at the bottom of the screen. I've stop drilled the ends of the cracks so you can see them a little bit clearer now. Two on this MIG weld here, and then quite a few on this MIG weld. This one kept this cracked. You could see a slight reflection in the light where I was unsure if it definitely was a complete crack or just a slight marking in the metal grain. but I'm pretty sure it chased it all the way up here, so there's 2 more extra cracks on that, two more extra stop drills on that crack there. And this one, as soon as I centre punched it, it grew even more when you shock the metal, so I had to have a second drill, and there's one here just ending about in the middle now. So we're going to now remove these MIG welds next. Here's the same area with the MIG welds removed. You can still see the stop drills. If we hadn't have done those stop drills at the ends of the cracks, we're unlikely to have now noticed where the ends of the cracks lie. So stop drills always come first, and then remove the MIG welds. And you can see the definition between the top layer and the threaded platform below, which is what we now want to penetrate our weld into and connect these two pieces back together. A little bit like what the old MIG welds were doing, but in better penetration, because we're not going to leave gaps down the side. Coated the area in a copper weld through primer, so there's never any bare metal. And then here's the other side as well. Stop drills at the ends of the cracks, 2 old MIG welds removed, and now we can weld those up as well as welding the cracks. There's the welding complete. We've covered over the crack on this left hand side front mount, and also filled in the areas that we removed the old MIG weld from. So now the weld is cooled down inside. We've painted the inside with an etch primer and then a high build primer, so there's never any bare metal left. We've got a copper weld through primer on the outside perimeter where we're about to put the Redish V2. This is the 005 plate with a slight kink in it and a hole for inspection in the future, and also waxing. After we've welded this cover plate on, we can then cavity wax all of this area that we've been welding in. Here's the effort we go to blend in the colour match and paint in the front section of the seat panel where we've been doing our cavity welding. We've got the cover plates welded on in place, and we've done an etch primer, then a high build primer, masked up the sound deadening pad that we're not taking off, and then dusted silver grey body paint colour to try and match the rest of the car. Now we'll just put a clear coat on top, again to match the shine of the rest of the inside of the car. So here's the finished inside on the rear seat. Now that we've colour coded the panel that we just welded and painted earlier on, it's now silver grey, like the rest of the car, silver grey everywhere. Now this area here and here where we've been working and welded, it's now silver grey. It's got a clear coat lacquer on as well, which is giving you the shine effect as well. And we've now we saved the small sections of sound deadening pad that we had to take off. We try and cut them off neatly, we save them, then we warm them back up and put them back into the original positions. And you'll always see that line there, because this top, they're always black, and this top coat is silver when the car is painted, so it's easy to it's hard to get them absolutely smudged in, but that shows that they're back in their original positions. That's the cover plate there, and another cover plate here. We got our holes, which are going to be for the BMW grommets later on, after we cavity wax, which is what we're doing now. We've got our 1/2 meter wands installed, and I'm just going to start cavity waxing. Obviously normally I'd be moving this wand about, but I'm holding the camera with the other hand. But this will just make sure that we're going to we'll put tons of this in to make sure that we get all the backs of the cavities and all the areas that we've been welding protected like when it left the factory, if not better, because we'll put about 1.5 litres of cavity wax into the front cavity and the rear cavity shortly. So here's the underside after we've just finished cavity waxing on the underneath panel as well. So that has 1.5 litres of cavity wax in the front section and the rear, and you might be able to hear it dropping onto the floor whilst it's still in its fresh creep state. What that's also doing is helping clean the cavities. You see the difference in colour from the first round of cavity wax that we installed, which helps bring out some dirt, debris, and now more of a fresh sort of golden colour. And the more you do it, the more original colour it stays. So that helps clean the cavity and protect it. And that's just constantly dripping out of the fluted sections, which are the escape paths for the electrophoretic colour coat at the factory, and also cavity wax. And we'll let that carry on creeping for as long as it needs, but normally it'll be a good half an hour to an hour. We'll wipe off as much excess as we can, put the grommets back into the various cavity holes, and then we can start the rebuild process. Here we are, partway through the rebuild on this E46 M3. We've now got the fuel tank system in, brake lines back in place, rear axle's just been installed and torqued Trailing arms are also fitted. We just replaced the left ball joint and camber bolt on this trailing arm because that was knocking. Fuel filler system and neck have just been put in, so next we'll be connecting brake lines to the flexible lines and putting the rear suspension springs in place, and then we'll be on to the prop shaft. Most of the underside's refitted now on this E46 M3, just the exhaust system to put on and the rear bumper. We've just carried out a brake fluid bleed through all 4 calipers, that's full system bleed. And then shortly, once we're fully rebuilt, we'll be heading off to wheel alignment process. We've finished the rebuild on this E46 M3, so we'll just go over and highlight what we've carried out. So had the rear axle carrier panel repair and reinforcement process using the Redish Motorsport V2 reinforcement plates. There's the left rear. You can just see the outline of the right rear. There's a right front behind that fuel filler neck, and a left front up there behind that handbrake cable. It's also had internal cavity welding on the front section only, underneath the rear seat panel. There were hairline cracks in the MIG weld, so it's had a small amount of internal work on the front section only. Then we've also replaced, as part of this job, steering tie rods up at the front of the car, because these were seized, so there was no way we could carry out the wheel alignment process. And we've separated that joint on the new pieces and coated them with a nickel anti-seize paste in here, so they're always likely to undo for years to come. We replaced all the BMW crimp clips for the inner and outer gaiters. Then we've also supplied and installed the genuine BMW rubber subframe bushes. New set of subframe bushes, and there's 4 of those, some for the front pair as well. Rear trailing arm bushes have been replaced, and they've been changed for the PowerFlex polyurethane version. There was one ball joint that was knocking, so we've replaced a ball joint in the lower left trailing arm, and also the BMW eccentric camber bolt and the washer and the nut. And again, that's got grease nickel anti-seize paste on the inside and the outside to make sure it doesn't corrode together in the sleeve like the last one did. There's also one exhaust nut that was cracked, so we've put a new genuine BMW copper coated nut on there, in that location. The gearbox had a little bit of an oil sweat, so that's been cleaned up, which is hard to see because there's now an under tray back on, but that's been cleaned so the customer can monitor and look over the coming years and see if there's any trickle of trace of any engine oil, gearbox oil. There was a constant pressure valve changed on the back of the engine block because that was showing signs of leaking, so that one's been changed and the oil leak's been cleaned up. The front Xenon headlight level sensor had a bracket broken off on the end, so a new one's been installed there. And again, we've got a nickel anti-seize paste on the inside and outside, so it's less likely to corrode and pop open in the future. A main engine auxiliary drive belt's been changed for the engine, but you can't see that because the under tray's back on. There's a couple of items behind the back seat area in the interior that were renewed as part of the job, and also the rear exhaust silencer clamp kit that was in a very poor state. They've been renewed for the X8R racing versions as well. So that completes our repair underneath this M3, and now we'll be carrying out a vehicle clean. And that's the end of the repair. It's had a 12-mile road test, digital wheel alignment, safe wash technique for the handover clean, and now the customer's here ready to collect and take the car back home.